these optimization zones can make it look like, oh, dude, you're way off the rocker. But really, you're still within great normal ranges, just not optimized.
How do you feel? Because I think that that's a big part of it.
Hey, have I earned the right to take these things? Kind of way I'm looking at it.
It shouldn't be a shortcut. It should be something that you have to do the hard work first, and then you can use this thing to optimize.
If you don't feel good and you're doing all the things we talk about in this show, dude, go get your blood work done. And if you find that a number's way off, one of these peptides or one of these things might be life-changing for you. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Gabe Yanez and I, we are on for our weekly episode. Now, we are going to start off by talking a little bit of smack. That's right. So it was about maybe 2 weeks ago, I got my ass handed to me in a High Rocks style workout. I'm not going to lie. I was just plumbering along. I don't even know if that's a word in this workout. And Gabe looked like a Greek god just kind of floating on this true form or air runner while I'm just slugging around. So I needed my opportunity to redeem myself. So I'm officially going to put out a challenge. And Gabe and I both had the opportunity to get blood work done. A company named Blokes reached out to us and said, hey, we'd love for you guys to, get your blood work done, check it out. And it's been a while. It's been 18 months since I had my blood work done. I think it's really important. We've talked about this on the show like a couple of years ago. And so I went and got my blood work done and great experience. Lady was awesome. I think I told you about it. She was like on the phone with the IRS while she was like drawing my blood. But then I got back my, what they call a Blokes optimization score. So this is obviously unique just to like this particular company. But what they do in their blood work is, they're not looking at like sick or fit. They're looking at like, this is the optimized zone. Are you in there? And they're assuming for the most part, you're going to be in that optimization zone, but you might have some variables. So my optimization score was 91%. And so I'm putting out the shit talk now because Gabe got his blood work done yesterday. We're gonna see if he has an optimization score better than mine when it comes to health and blood markers. So the challenge has been set. We'll see what happens for you.
Oh man! All right, we'll see. Do you know what kind of things were like any like red flags, early red flags, anything?
Well, I mean, so the way it breaks down on this particular blood work, which I haven't seen before, which is pretty cool. The previous company we went through, Merrick Health, they did a good job too, but it was much more like, I'd say a lot more like the way you'd see it like in your doctor's office, like just like kind of point blank. This one is a little bit more like, I don't know, I guess I'd say branded for lack of a better term. Like you get like a whole PDF packet that like kind of shows you like, and so it starts off with like this optimization score. So I had 3% in suboptimal range, 6% in high range, and then 63 markers in that kind of optimal range. And so as you go down, it looks at your white blood count. It looks at your, I have it right here. I pull it up. You have your CBC, you have your blood glucose, a bunch of different things. For me, what I was really interested in is like, I was really interested in like my testosterone. I was really interested just in overall like prostate. I just want to know like, hey man, like I work out, I eat okay, like show me underneath the hood. Like, let me see the blood work. And so in general, cholesterol was good. Everything was good, but my thyroid was a little bit, I guess, I don't know. I wrote notes, but I guess my thyroid was a little bit off. Normal goes to 4.5 thyroid, underactive thyroid when thyroid number goes up. So there's some stuff that I'm going to look at from a thyroid perspective. Maybe she was talking to me about like gut health. She was talking to me about, maybe having like some different type of like omegas in my diet to maybe support some of this stuff. And so
it's because you don't need anything.
So the thyroid was a little bit off, but aside from that, everything else was good. But one thing that they were, kind of reassured me on is like, look, dude.
Did you have like a meeting with someone yet to present?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
One thing they told me is like, look, bro, like you show this blood work to any doctor.
Didn't say, look, bro.
Yeah. If you show this blood work to any doctor, they're going to be like, dude, come back and see me in a year. Like it's not even going to be a factor.
Right.
But we're not here to tell you like, dude, you're sick or you're healthy. Like we're assuming you're already like pretty dialed. Obviously, if there's something like dramatic, they would tell me. But these optimization zones can make it look like, oh shit, dude, you're way off the rocker. But really, you're still within great normal ranges, just not optimized. And so they were giving me ideas like, for example, one of the things they were saying is like my vitamin D and B12 were both not appropriate. So that's like an easy supplement or that I could start jumping on. And that this thyroid thing could be a little bit of something to keep track on. But one of the things I want to bring attention to on this podcast, and we could dive into this more, is that it was really helpful for me when I was on the phone with the nurse practitioner or the doctor, was that I was able to pull up my blood work from 18 months ago and look at trends. So what was really unique is I pulled up my testosterone from 18 months ago, and then I pulled up my testosterone from this time, and I'm able to compare. I was able to compare all these other numbers. So one of the benefits of getting your blood work at like a really deep level every year is that now you can start looking at macro trends. And so that was really helpful for me to be able to do.
Yeah. There's a bunch of things that I think are really interesting about a lot of these services now that specifically are targeting men and optimization, because I think everything that you've experienced so far, and I'm a little behind the eight ball because it took me a while to get out and do blood, but I'm really excited to get my result and have my meeting and talk shit on the podcast. But I think that, unfortunately some companies and a lot of it out there has turned into like just this expedient way to get everyone on TRT. And that's my concern, right? Like my concern is that for a lot of, and I'm not saying that blokes falls in this bucket at all. And it sounds like they're really just trying to get you to be optimal. But I know that TRT has kind of taken off into this like slippery slope of like,
or peptides in general.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but TRT
a lot of that stuff.
TNT definitely, but peptides also.
Like, for example, I was surprised. I watched a Hiller video recently.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. It's like a guilty pleasure of mine to watch his content. Honestly, like how like some women love like the housewives
drama shows,
like whatever. Like I love Hiller content. But anyway, he posted this video essentially talking shit about Josh Bridges because Josh Bridges made a video saying it was like a clickbaity like my TRT dose or whatever. And then the actual video is Josh Bridges saying that like his TRT routine. And then he goes off on like,
it's like
getting
squatting.
sunlight, eating meat, like whatever. Right. And so Hiller was talking shit because Hiller's been openly on TRT for a while. Right. Like he's been going through a different company. He's been sharing his experience. As soon as he knew that he wasn't going to compete anymore, he was like, hey, I'm doing this TRT thing. And he's been kind of sharing his experience there. And I think it's important. So I think both sides are important. I think it's important to not have this stigma of anyone that's on TRT is cheating or on steroids or whatever, because genuinely some men do need it. And I do think that there's no reason not to optimize if you've already done all the things Josh Bridges talks about, which a lot of people do. A lot of people are already working out, getting sleep, and for some reason their testosterone levels have just tanked. Great. Like work with a responsible practitioner that can help you optimize those levels and feel better. Why wouldn't you do that?
Dude.
Having said that, on the other side, it's like if a bunch of people are coming in and they're not focusing on their sleep, they're not taking the right supplements, like you said, they're not controlling their stress, they're not working out, they're not watching their diet, but they can find a service and a doctor is just going to say, oh, like TRT will help. I think that might do more harm than good. But what I was genuinely surprised about, I never thought about this before. Did you know that Hiller's 33? I don't know why I thought he was older. Not to say that he like looks older or anything, but that kind of like impacted me a little bit because I'm 33. So we're exactly the same age. And I just like, at least for me, even if, my blood work comes back, and I don't expect this at all because a lot of the things that you would feel if your testosterone was low, honestly, I don't feel. I feel great. I'm performing well. I'm getting good sleep, all that good stuff. I would be very, very hesitant to do something like TRT because I feel like I'm still too young to do something like that. And that's based off of maybe just, again, the stigma out there of like, you really should only be doing that stuff once you've hit a certain age. But it felt like a very young age to be there, because at least my understanding, and again, I'm talking about this like the furthest thing from an expert, but my understanding is that for a lot of people, like once you start, like you're kind of signing up for it for life, essentially, because one of the things is like, yes, this is going to help you optimize, but you're also going to stunt your body's natural ability to produce the hormone. And so like you're signing up for this, but you're signing up for this kind of in perpetuity. Yeah. So I don't know, just watching that video, and again, love Hiller's content, have no shit to talk about him, but I was genuinely
you just don't want him to come and attack us.
Well, I mean, for this reason, I've no shit to talk about him. I disagree on a bunch of things, but I genuinely enjoy his content. But it did strike me that he was 33, just because, especially that's exactly how old I am. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. It seems young.
The testosterone thing. I mean, you got to be. There's a lot of options out there. One thing I will say for anybody interested in blood work. So while we're on the subject, my testosterone, and I'll tell you any numbers about anything. I mean, I don't care about. I'll share my blood work publicly. It doesn't matter to me. I was asked by the person, like, hey, are you competing in a sport that's drug testing? I said, no. Because obviously if I was, that would change my perspective on this, right? Obviously. But because I'm not competing in a sport that is drug testing, and frankly, even if I was competing in, I mean, if someone asked me, hey man, you're competing in tactical games or jiu-jitsu or this or that, are you on TRT? Let's just say I was, which I'm not. But if I was, I'd be like, yeah, I am. Like, whatever. Like if that means I can't be in the pro division that gets a prize purse, or whatever, it doesn't matter. But my testosterone before 18 months ago was 458. So, which is actually pretty low. It's not like crazy low, but it's pretty low. Low testosterone is considered 300 or less. So like actually like by scientific side. But like based on this, I mean, the one I'm looking at right now, dude, the optimization mode is between 800 and 1200 testosterone. Then there's also like the free testosterone, but the testosterone, like the total testosterone, 800 to 1200 is like the optimization mode that they have, zone that they have here. Mine that I just got back was 553. So it has me on the lower end, right? So previously I was at 448. Now I'm at 553. So my testosterone went up in 18 months. Why? I don't know. But that's cool to track because let's just say I'd gone from 450 to 400.
You said in 18 months?
18 months, yeah. But let's just say it had gone down. Okay, well then maybe that would make me even more interested in staying on track. But because I saw it go up, it's not trending down. So maybe I shouldn't worry about it. And I'm not worried about it, by the way. But I think that they're asking good questions when I was on the phone with these guys, like, hey, how do you feel? How are you sleeping? How are this? How are that? But there are alternatives. And I think that a lot of people think like, oh, it's just injectables. Dude, I didn't realize this, but there's now things like you could put underneath your tongue that dissolve. And you could, but it's a huge commitment. Like this one that I was sent, Sermorelin. So there was a few that I was sent, like just to do some research on. One is called Sermorelin. It's a growth hormone peptide, and that one you'd either have to inject every day, 5 days a week, or you could put it underneath your tongue 5 days a week before you go to bed. When your body's basically your food needs to be digested. So your blood sugar and your body is as prepared to receive that peptide. But that's a huge commitment, dude. I mean, and then other ones that they mentioned that might be an option. I'm going to do, again, some more research on is vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, VIP, they call it. I'm going to do some basic research on that. And then the last one I'm going to do a research on is enclomiphene, which is naturally increases testosterone production. So instead of taking TRT, you could take that, which has a similar byproduct, but it allows your body just to produce more. Same thing as the HGH. Instead of just replacing the testosterone, it's like signaling your body to produce more naturally.
We got to get JP on the podcast to talk about peptides. I feel like he'd be a really fun. He'd be a fun guest to bring on as like a non-expert expert to just like. I remember when we had him on that, and he just like pulled up his bag of pills. He'd be really fun to have this discussion with.
Dude, you're totally right. I mean, even as I'm saying these names, I'm just butchering the shit out of them. But we're being real about this. Like, look,
would you be open to like committing to some of this stuff, knowing that like. Because okay, so let me ask you a question. How do you feel? Because I think that that's a big part of it, right? Like, I think a big part of it is like, I think that there's nothing wrong with like, if you're like, man, like, I feel drained all the time. Like, I'm just like, like all the symptoms that low testosterone like are attributed to, then you would be like, hey, like that's a problem that I can solve and just have a better quality of life. But I think that the biggest, to me at least, litmus test of like, is this something I would want to do or not, is like, do I feel like there's room here to optimize? I don't know. What do you think? Well, like, do you think that there's areas that like you could significantly improve with some help aside from just, like getting stronger or whatever? And is that really kind of a big goal?
Well, what I liked about this conversation with these guys at Blokes is like, I do think back to what you were saying, there is this stigma in this new optimization age. And a lot of people, by the way, aren't even familiar with this, but I just want to make sure that we're on this podcast raising awareness that there are tons of companies now that are doing blood work and optimization for men and for women that is just like outside your normal medical doctor. Like you could find this, whether it's Merrick, Blokes, and probably a slew of others, that at least, if nothing else, I think
and Blokes also has their like, they work with women. They have like a sister company or something.
It's called Joy, I think. Joy. I think it's Joy, yeah. But the point is like, if you're listening to this conversation, like, bro, I'm not interested in any of this stuff. What you should be interested in, and we talked about this when we were working with Merrick Health, is just getting your blood work done. Like it doesn't, it's hard for anybody out there to negotiate or whatever, why you shouldn't be getting like a nice full panel done. Not like your simple, basic, go to the doctor, okay, you're not dying, come back. I mean like really, like you're fasted and you're really getting like a full lipid panel and you're just gathering data that then you could revert back to. I think it's just so important for health-wise. And it just builds up your confidence, like that what you're doing is actually working in the gym, that like training hard. Like it made me feel good that the guy says to me on the phone, hey man, I'm just letting you know, like we see blood work normally between the 70s and 90s. It's really, really rare for me to see somebody at 91% optimized. Like that made me feel like,
that's awesome.
Like hell yeah, right? Like
that's why you do the things you do. That's you walking the walk of like everything we talk about on the podcast and on the newsletter, because that is extending not just your longevity, like how long you're going to live. Like one thing Peter Attia talks about a lot about is like just how long you're going to be like in really good shape and vital and be like that. That to me is like the most black and white example. I mean, obviously aside from your capacity and all the things you can do, of like the proof's in the pudding, man. Like this is why you train hard.
Dude, show me under the hood, man. And so again, whatever company you go with, just, yeah.
But before we move on.
I definitely want to talk about like the question you actually asked. I got off on a tangent. The question you actually asked, okay? And this is my honest to God answer to the gentleman I was on the phone with. So I first spoke to a woman and then I spoke to a gentleman on the same call. One was more of like a medical professional and then one was really talking more on the like optimization side. And I said to the guy, I'm like, look, man, send me over information on these different things because I want to do my own research because I feel like even like having this podcast, we have an obligation to at least have like a basic knowledge of these things because I'm not very familiar with them. But number two, I told the guy, I'm like, look, man, I'm just letting you know, I don't feel confident in taking any of this for two primary reasons. Number one, I feel pretty damn good. And number two, I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you that I've done everything in my power to optimize myself before I started doing this. So like what I meant by that is like, I know that dairy and gluten causes inflammation for me, but yet I still eat those things. And I know that it makes me feel bad sometimes in the morning. I have aches and pains and joints and whatever. I know that there's certain things I'm doing during the day. Like for example, consuming alcohol. I'm not like, if I have 2 IPAs, I feel like shit the next day, right? But I'm choosing to do that. So if once I choose to stop doing those things, then I feel like you earn the right to be like, all right, man, like I've dialed all this stuff in, but my joints still hurt. My body still aches. I think there will be a time in the next probably 5 to 10 years, I will be exploring these things because A, the science is going to get better. The data is going to be out there more. And I'm getting older and I train hella hard. So those things don't always work together.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, man. I think for me, and granted, I have to have my conversation and see what my results look like.
You're going to be at 89%. I hope you're at, I hope all bullshit aside, I hope you're at like 99%, obviously, as a friend. Like, I don't want you to be sick.
Fucked up. No, but honestly, like for me, it would take there to be something way, way off. And even that I would be like super skeptical of because honestly, I feel great. But it would take something being way, way off for me to consider anything that isn't just like a supplement that like, is kind of like over the counter and I've heard of. Because I wouldn't be surprised if stuff like, B complex, like vitamin D, because I know how important that stuff is. I used to work in the supplement space. Like I worked for a company that does a great job really only producing products for things that are very common deficiencies. And I know that vitamin D, magnesium, B complex, like these are super common. And I haven't been great about taking those things. I eat pretty healthy, but I wouldn't be surprised if those maybe were holes that I could address. And I would address those with supplements or dietary changes, but I would be very skeptical and maybe it is the fact that there still is this stigma around, but I wouldn't be comfortable going down the peptide or TRT route unless like something was crazy off. But again, if something was crazy off, I would immediately, I don't know if it would be like a second opinion or like doing it again, but I would feel like something is off there, because I think the biggest, telltale sign is just how you feel. Like, I think you build an awareness of your health and your body, especially when you're an athlete, when you've competed, when you have been healthy for years. Like, I know when I'm going to get sick. I know when I'm run down. I know when I haven't gotten great sleep. Like, I wake up and I know that I'm at like 70%. I'm not at 90. And I also know when I'm at 100, and I feel good right now. So I would be surprised for something to be way off, but I'm super curious to see, and I'm curious to have the information.
Well,
and I love what you're doing, because I even if I'm not open to taking something or starting a peptide or whatever, and they recommended, hey, this might be something you want to do, I would want to now start to educate myself on what these things are, what, the pros are, what the cons are, so that then come 5 years from now, come when I'm 40 or whatever, once I feel more comfortable with this stuff, I've already done a little bit of research and feel more comfortable, more educated, as opposed to just taking someone's recommendation for it. So I think that what you're doing is exactly what I want to do. And there's so many benefits to that, because you might not take those now, but you're doing the work now to understand them a little bit better, so that when they're recommended again, maybe 5 years from now, you're like, oh, I actually did a lot of reading, talked to a lot of people, and now you can make a more educated decision.
For sure. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's the Wolverine juice, which we've talked about a little bit on the show, which is, you haven't heard of BPC 157? So,
I have heard of
so BPC 157 is, I'm just going to get the exact definition off our good friends at Google. BPC promotes healing in various tissue, including muscle, tendons, ligaments, and gastrointestinal tract. So basically what they're talking about with BPC 157 is that it's like the modern day, like Wolverine juice, right? And so I was talking to this guy, and I didn't realize this, but FDA pulled that, and they're talking about like re-bringing it out to the market. And so you start asking yourself like, well, why did they pull it? And I mean, obviously there's a whole bunch of like bullshit that might be involved in terms of the medical system, but at least like just tracking these things and having them on your radar, I think is really important. One thing I want to note for any guy listening, I was talking to a friend of mine who goes to the men's club, and he was talking to me about training. And obviously that's an area that we are very passionate about: back squatting, running, blah, 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 blah. But dude, he feels like shit. And if you feel like shit, you got to start evaluating how you're sleeping, eating, all that stuff that we talk about on the show endlessly. However, in addition to, dude, you might go to the doctor and get your blood work done, and you might have extremely low testosterone. You might have all these different blood markers. And in that case, dude, getting on a testosterone or getting on one of these things could be life-changing for these people. So I just want to caveat everything we're saying, that Gabe and I are talking about our personal feelings because we both feel good. That being said, if you don't feel good and you're doing all the things we talk about on this show, dude, go get your blood work done. And if you find that a number's way off, one of these peptides or one of these things might be life-changing for you. So make sure to go do your research on that, because no one wants to feel like shit. It impacts the way you show up as a husband, as a father. Like if I'll never forget, like Matt Walker is a part of our company. Like, dude, he would tell me like his back was like broken for like years. And then when he finally got it better, he didn't realize like when you're in pain for so long, how it makes you just so irritable and whatnot.
It's the worst. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're finding yourself in those situations, we're not downplaying. Like, dude, if there's value in testosterone or any of these things for you, fuck yeah. But the first step is blood work. And then you could evaluate, hey, have I earned the right to take these things? Kind of way I'm looking at it. And
I like that approach. I even like how you word it, like, have I earned the right? Because it should be that, right? Like, it shouldn't be a shortcut. It should be something that you have to do the hard work first, and then you can use this thing to optimize. I like that approach.
Yeah, the earned idea, I think, is really something again, I wish I had like a recording of this call, which probably was like some kind of HIPAA law or whatever. But I literally said that to the guy. I'm like, look, dude, like, I don't know if I could, in good conscience, take this kind of stuff, because I don't think I've earned the right yet. Like, let me go back to the drawing board, and I'll come back to you and I'll talk to you.
We should also, I wonder if you can reach out, and who would be good to like maybe have as a guest on to just kind of like talk about this stuff from a more educated perspective of like I would want to know what do they test for that your regular doctor doesn't test for, and why? Like that would be, I think, a good question, right? Like, what are these other markers that you're not getting if you're just getting your physical once a year, and why are those important? I think that getting someone maybe from their team that can speak
we can get someone from, we could probably get Josh from their team. I mean, we've had some guys from Merrick Health come on. That was a couple of years ago though.
Yeah.
So it's probably due time. I mean, and science has changed and things have changed. So I'll definitely reach out to those guys and see if we can get them on.
And then the flip side of this, and then we can kind of move on, is sometimes people look incredibly healthy or are doing the fitness side of things really well. And you might think that everything is good and well. But I mean, one thing that I know to be true, and like, for example, I mean, again, I'd be a little bit surprised because I think I feel pretty good, but I wouldn't be like, I'm not expecting my testosterone levels to be like through the roof high, because I know that there's a lot of things that I'm doing now that I know aren't ideal to optimize those things. Some are in my control, some are in my control. I'm training really hard. Like I'm, training for a marathon, and I have to do most of my runs early in the morning. And we have a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old. Like, it's kind of a crapshoot the night of sleep that I'm going to get, even if I go to bed early. I'm telling you, the last 3 nights in a row, alternating kids. It's been Charlie, Shay have just like, there's been an hour in the middle of the night where they're just like inconsolable for whatever reason. They're like going through a little like sleep regression, whatever. But like that is interrupted sleep that is outside of my control, because we have.
You didn't let them just stay up and cry it out like Trevor was talking about.
Well, so I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But we have Shay. We have Shay in his own room, and we followed.
I'm totally kidding, by the way. Like,
well, no, I mean, we. So this was actually a pretty involved decision, but we ended up doing the Take Care of Baby sleep training, and we've stuck with it like to the T, even to now. Where, because they have, what they do is it's kind of an in-between like just letting kids cry it out and like being there every step of the way. And I really like the approach. And it's an approach where they have like certain time intervals where you're supposed to go in and like remind them that like, hey, you're right next door or whatever, but it's not, it tries to eliminate, them just eventually ending up on your bed or you ending up there. And it's worked well for us so far. But anyway, sleep hasn't been great past 3 days, but even in the past month, 2 months, we had the mold in Shay's room. Shay had to come in our room, and sleep was like terrible those 2 weeks. So I know I haven't been getting the best sleep. I know I'm trying not to burn the candle at both ends, but I'm still testing flex and really trying to like focus on that training, both because it's the program that I write and because I really enjoy it. I'm also training for this marathon. So I've been trying to balance, like making sure that, I'm getting all that volume in, but I'm also recovering. So long-winded way of saying, sometimes you might be someone that, hey, I train really hard. Like I do a lot of exercise, like I eat pretty healthy. I think that once that you realize that like recovery and sleep quantity and quality are probably the most important aspects of like optimizing your hormones, you could easily be someone that like is really dedicated to your fitness, really dedicated to your nutrition. And those things might not be as optimized as you think. So I'm curious what that number is going to look like, because it could be that one way to know. That could be something that is like a, hey, I'm doing too much, or like, it's not the best idea to like train for like a lofty goal when you have 2 little kids, but like, it's just a season of my life. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is, just because you exercise regularly and work really hard, like, is that an important part of health? Of course, that's what we preach. That's why it's train hard. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these things on their hood are optimized. And the only way to know, like you said, is actually seeing what's going on.
Yeah, man. Hey, by the way, from a sleep perspective, I know a lot of people, not me in particular. And if it was me, I would tell you that like 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams of THC gummies, game changer for a lot of people. So I know multiple people for sleep. So I know multiple people where they lay down. So this has not happened for me, and I'm very, very blessed in that way, where, you could be having a tough day, and let's just say, obviously with family business, there's always something, and you lay down and you got like this freeway of thoughts going through, and you can't shut down the engines. And you end up like staying awake for another hour or 2 hours, whatever. And obviously the things that we could talk about with, avoiding, eating a couple hours ahead of time, not drinking water, so you don't have to go pee so much, et cetera. But at the end of the day, if you suffer from that, I know many people in our circle that have been utilizing like a 5 milligram to 10 milligram like sleeping gummy from THC, which is like, it's specifically designed, it says like sleeping. It's not made to like get you all high and messed up or whatever. It's just designed like 45 minutes before you go to bed, you eat one, and it's been a game changer. So for anybody who's out there who's really struggling with sleep, that's something I've known multiple people on. Now, on the flip side, you can say, okay, don't become dependent on it, all this kind of stuff. Like, I'm not here to tell you your life choices. I'm just letting you know this has worked for people that I know. That's it.
Yeah. 3-2-1 rule would be my suggestion. Like, if you're not doing that first,
don't pop the gummies.
Yeah, before you go pop the THC gummies. I think that this is just like, none of this stuff is easy to do, but it's very simple. Don't eat 3 hours before bed. Don't drink 2 hours before bed. No blue light 1 hour before bed. I think if you're not trying your best to do those, that's kind of where I would start in terms of sleep quality. But dude, I've been super fortunate. I've never had trouble like falling asleep, staying asleep. I get really good sleep. It's just, when the kid's crying, you got to get up.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of times I found that a lot of women, I think, suffer more from having trouble with sleep than I think men do. Now, that's just like my like theoretical framework based on the people I know, but I could be totally off by that. But that's what I'm thinking. So if you suffer from it, do what Gabe said, and then if that doesn't work, go find some other alternative.
Okay. Yeah. All right, let's get controversial here and talk about politics. I'm really curious your take, and I'm curious your take, and also I wanted to hash out a conversation we had in the car the other day that I think we disagree on, or maybe we don't. But this is coming out Thursday, the 7th. So
this comes out the day after election, or 2 days or whatever.
2 days after. So election day is behind us. Who knows what's going on right now?
Dude, right now when this podcast released, it could be so many things going on in the world.
It could be super weird.
I hope it's not.
Super weird. I hope it's not, but it could be weird. But anyway, the conversation we were having, and I'm just curious kind of if change your mind, or I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is, how much does the outcome of something like the presidential election impact like you, your family? Like, how involved should anyone be? But particularly, like, we talk a lot about husbands and fathers. Like, how involved should you be in like being informed with what's going on? Because I can make an argument that like people that make their entire identity around like politics and who they stand for, Republican, Democrat, red, blue, whatever, I don't think that's healthy. Right? Like, I think that there's obviously an extreme there where it's like, there's things that you should focus on. And Nick Freitas said this, right? Like, he had a great quote on the podcast. He was like, the thing you have control over is like your home, and that should be where your primary focus is. But I think he actually said it on his podcast too. It's kind of this thing where like, it's controversial and it's kind of like taboo to talk about politics and religion, but like, there's also a responsibility there to talk about politics and religion because it impacts your life. And I think it's your duty as like a citizen and your duty as a father and a husband. So what in your mind is the balance there? Because the conversation that we had on the way up to SFO was like, hey, at the end of the day, like, who's in the White House doesn't impact your life. And I said, like, I think it does impact. I think it has actually a pretty big impact. And I think that you should 100% care about who's in there. And, you don't have to go out and like, volunteer or phone bank or start posting stuff on social media, but you should vote and you should, like educate yourself on who you're voting for. What do you think?
I think that, here's a good way to put it. Just like I said about the blood work, where like I didn't earn the right to like get on peptides. Like I need to start off with these other things. I think that before you can get wrapped up in who the actual president is, you got to ask yourself, are you doing the things at your home, in your local community to make a positive impact? And that's step number one, I think, because it's easy to get distracted by all these other things and forget that your home is the biggest impact you could actually make. Like, I feel like in my community, I could really sit down and say, I am making a positive impact on my community because of the men's club, because of what I do in my home. Like, I really feel that way. So that being said, you were right. I mean, it does impact, especially like this election. If I had like, Liz is pulling up something, voter turnout. what are we getting at here? About 2/3 of the voting eligible population turned out for the 2020 presidential, the highest rate for any national election since 1900. Oh, wow. So we'll see how many people show up this year for the election. But what I would say is, for me, it is important, especially like if you had a girls in sports, I think that this is an important election. If you have specific causes that are like really the two sides just don't necessarily see eye to eye, I think this is a really important election. I think this is an important election regardless. But here's what I've been doing, me personally. I was fascinated by the Trump Rogan podcast. Fascinated. I listened to the whole thing. And I also am like halfway through the JD Vance one. And here's the reason why I'm so fascinated. I'm fascinated because this, in my opinion, should be the way any presidential nominee or candidate should have to do something like this. Like, just sit down and just have a conversation, get to know somebody, get rid of the sound bites and the bullshit and just talk. Because after 3 hours, you could kind of get a general sense of like who the person is and what they're about, in my opinion. So what I did is I listened to the Trump one, I listened to the Vance one, and then I started researching and Googling as many long form Harris podcasts as I could find. I was just very intrigued. This was actually this morning. And I'm very interested. I'm like, okay, show me the different ones, right? So I went on her YouTube. I went on podcasts. I started searching down because I was curious why the Harris administration said to Rogan that they would allow her, that they want her on the podcast, but for an hour and at their spot. And Rogan's like, dude, I just want to have it like me and you in a room and just having a conversation. I could appreciate his perspective. Like even JD Vance on his said this is the first time he hadn't had Secret Service around him in 3 months, which I thought was really unique. Like they're all out of the room. So anyways, my total take on this right now is that for this election, it does impact us more than I think it had in the past. But I still think you got to take care of home first. But I think that whether you like Trump, hate Trump, like Harris, hate Harris, whatever, I think the expectation should be for all presidential nominees moving forward, there has to be a platform that's unedited, uncensored, and long form to really get to know these people. And I think it's going to change the game, dude. I really do. In the next 4 years, I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, they're already saying that they call this the podcast election because it is the first election where, we've only had one debate. But both candidates are going on all these different shows, Trump's been on a bunch, but even Harris has been on the Shannon Sharp podcast, which is a pretty big podcast, Breakfast Club, like all these other shows. So yeah, man, it's interesting how it's going to change. The one argument that I heard that I think is a good argument for why these podcasts are not helpful. And it's unfortunate that it's going down this route is that podcast guests don't have any incentive to ask tough questions, right? Because if you think about it,
they want a good conversation.
They want a good conversation. They also their incentive is to possibly be able to get these people back on. So there's no expectation there that it's going to be in any way like challenging, fact checking, whatever. It's always going to be, I enjoyed the Trump Rogan podcast. It was a cool, just human conversation of just two guys talking. And I agree with you. I think it gives you an insight on people that is real and feels a lot more authentic. But I thought it was a good argument that if we go down this road of now candidates only go on podcasts, then they're really going to only go on and this has kind of been the case. They go on podcasts with people that they know are going to be pretty friendly to them, and it ends up being friendly conversations. And then if you've already set the precedent that, you only have one debate, then who's challenging the candidates? Who's asking the really tough questions on both sides? I think is valid, right? And then the question there is there a responsibility on someone like Rogan to really push and challenge Trump on some things that he definitely could be challenged on, right? Both the candidates have areas
I thought he pushed. He could have pushed harder, probably in some areas, but he definitely tried to keep him on track. I felt like.
Well, keep him on track is one thing, but pushing him on some stuff is others. But also, that's not his job, right?
You're right. Really he was just there to have a conversation. You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what the podcast is. He doesn't, and he said he's super open about this. He doesn't bring people on to try and gotcha or ask really tough questions. He brings people on because he's genuinely interested in them as humans and wants to have a conversation, which is exactly what he did. But anyway, I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment. I tend to agree more with you that it's revealing when someone has to just sit down and have a conversation for 3 hours, because you can't script that. You can't take talking
it humanizes
from
them.
your staff and regurgitate them for 3 hours. So you peel through those layers and you get to like the real person. So I think that that's the benefit. But I do think that the potential con is that, now do we ever have candidates going up against, tough interviews? And I think that happened already less this election cycle than it has in the past. And if it keeps trending that way, maybe that's an unfortunate thing because no one's ever getting challenged.
Fuck, I don't know, man. Yeah, it's tough because I can see like in a podcast when you sit there for 3 hours and you start to, kind of let your guard down. Now all of a sudden you're answering in a more authentic way. So let's just say you're not answering like a super hard question, but you are answering it in the way that like you actually feel, versus being pressed in some press conference and just giving the soundbite that your team tells you to say. Like,
right.
I just want to know that whoever like we're getting, like we actually are understanding their views and not like the party agenda that's being pushed. And I think the long form does that, but I think you need both. To your point, like you need both. And I think over the next 4 years, you're going to see a shift towards like maybe both. And I think that mainstream media is going to have to wake up, man. People are sick of the headlines and the clickbait and all that type of shit. And I think, I think people are becoming more and more aware of it. We've talked about that countless times on this podcast, but I think that that's something that needs to end because it's not helping the overall mainstream media to always be looked at as like, okay, those people are just trying to get clicks.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I hope people go out there and vote. I hope that people take to heart what you said. I think you hit the nail on the head with like taking control and making sure that you're having an impact on your family first, your community second, and the big picture stuff third. But at the same time, I think there is a balance there of like, you can't also just like be very flippant and like, oh, this doesn't matter at all. I think you need to be informed to some extent. And I do think that generally speaking, it's a net positive, the fact that we're getting all these podcasts and just more time to like get to know these people. Cause I think it's tougher to fudge or tougher to just be like this fake character when you're out there having like long, real conversations with real people.
Yeah, man. It's going to be, I mean, dude, because, I'm flying to Austin on the 5th. So next Tuesday or whatever. And then I'm supposed to be flying back the next day. And I mean, I don't mind being in Austin if shit's going down because I have a lot of friends out there with a lot of guns and it's all good. but I don't know, man. I mean, I could see a world. I don't even know. I don't want to speculate because it just seems like you're kind of what do they call it? Fear mongering or whatever they call it. Like let's just put it this way though. I wouldn't be surprised, regardless of how the election goes, if we don't actually find out the quote unquote winner for a week. And during that time, a lot of tension is there. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. The optimist in me hopes that nothing crazy happens, man. I'd like to think that a lot of that is overplayed by the media and like, does it happen? Yes. Is it as crazy as maybe they make it seem? Hopefully not. That's kind of the optimist in me. I do want to say though, that regardless of what happens, the one thing that's been super exciting for me and generally I think has been a net positive is just how, because of RFK's involvement, like just health and like health and nutrition and like what's going on with our food, like the fact that that's just being talked about is a positive, period. Like that's it. Like, do I hope that, he can get in there and actually have an impact and start making change? Honestly, I do. I 100% do. Like that to me, my values are very, very important. And I'd love for him to, be able to take the steering wheel on a lot of the things that are going on with health and agriculture in our country and make some improvements. But the fact that it's being talked about, the fact that, these speeches are happening, the fact that he's more in the spotlight, that alone, I'll take as a win regardless of what happens.
Yeah. And I can't see how anybody listens to like the data and like him, and they might not like him and all of his other politics or whatever, but like what he's championing and the data he's pulling about sick Americans and about food, like it's really hard to debate. Like
you can't debate it because it's just facts, and it's like a big problem that we need to solve. And he just wants to find a solution. Like, there's nothing controversial about that.
There's nothing controversial about that.
There shouldn't be, at least.
Or at least there shouldn't be. Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, I hope he gets I hope he gets a voice, however he gets it, because I think that that's ultimately one of the bigger things that people aren't even talking about. And I was listening to like JD Vance talk about this a little bit. I think we are getting hung up at times in some stuff that's like, he was talking in particular about the environment and whatnot. And I think there's a lot to be talked about, but it's like, when it comes to Americans and their health, it's just such like, why is that not happening more often? Why are not more people talking about this on like a grand scale? Because it has such a slippery snowball effect, right? But it's because a shit ton of people are making money in so many different ways. So yeah, it's that we should get somebody on the show. I don't know who we could. Maybe we should bring on Nick Freitas and talk about that particular subject. That would be really intriguing to me because he's in the political world.
That would be, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like, because we had him on the show and we talked more about like being a dad and whatnot. So make sure to go back and check out that episode if you're listening to this show right now. But yeah, my 2 takeaways are reach out to blokes and get someone on to talk about peptides and TRT, and then reach out and talk to Nick again.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Nick podcast. I got a really cool message from someone that listens to the podcast, just saying how like, hey, I do not agree with a lot of the politics and like point of views that Nick has, but it was a great episode, and it got me to listen to his podcast a little bit, and it's just opened my eyes to some stuff, and it was a very cool message to get from someone that just was very open-minded and okay to listen to someone that they clearly disagree with. And I hope that that's something that more people are leaning into, because I think it's so important, man. Like even the stuff that we're talking about now, like you might 100% disagree with everything we're saying, but I hope that you can just listen to it with a little bit of an open mind and not dig your heels in on one side, which I think is something that we see a lot of. So appreciate that, listener. Appreciate people, having an open mind about this stuff. And, at the end of the day, my life experiences are going to shape my values, and my values are going to shape kind of where I fall on some of these things. And yours might be completely different, and that's perfectly okay. Like that's the way it should be, right?
That's the way it should be.
Period.
I got a message about Dr. Trevor and about how he was kind of, I don't want to use the word bashing, but criticizing the Western medicine, because he has an MD, but he also then has his chiropractic license. And they wish that we had dove into, okay, so if this is a bad over here on the Western, talk to me about the positives of chiropractic and Eastern medicine or whatnot, and like share with me a solution. Like that was the feedback from and it was super positive. They're like, look, dude, I thought it was a good conversation. I disagree with him on some stuff, but I would have loved to hear him talk about that. And so I was like, all right, I took that down as like, all right, in the future, when we have him back on, like we should have dove in that way, which makes me think that some of our podcasts, we might need to go longer than like that hour time frame, because then you start getting into some of those type of things. So we'll see, but I'll add that as a third note for myself.
Yeah. Last thing that I wanted to bring up, super exciting. So again, this is coming out Thursday. So right now it's November 7th. This Monday, 11/11th, also Veterans Day. So shout out to any veterans out there. We are starting a new cycle on Flex on the Train Hard app. So just really quick, we did this earlier in the year in the summer, and it was super popular. People loved it. A bunch of people crushed PRs. Is this strength cycle. So the last cycle of the year is going to be a little bit of a strength bias. Again, every cycle in Flex, we have strength and we have hypertrophy, but we alternate between which one is kind of like the lead horse. This final cycle is a little bit more strength bias, and we're again going to do that 5x5, 6x4, 8x3 progression, which I personally loved, and a lot of people reached out and loved. So I was like, guess what? We're going to do it again. So the whole idea here is we're going to do 2 weeks of 5x5 and 3 key lifts. Then we're going to do 6x4, 8x3. The idea there is that you're doing around 24 to 25 like working reps, but because the sets get smaller, it should make it easier for you to really, really get heavier as you go. So it's like a cheat code to progressive overload, so that by week 6, you should be doing the 8x3, which is 24 working reps in a significantly heavier load than you did the 5x5. And that gives you a really nice way to build some strength. And then after the 6 weeks, we'll have a testing week, and hopefully everyone will end, not hopefully, everyone that does this is going to end 2024 with some really cool 3-rep max PRs, get super strong going into the new year. So I'm super pumped about this. This is also going to be like the last flex cycle that I like follow pretty day by day, because I have the marathon coming January 18th. So I'm going to go super hard on this cycle specifically, because this will kind of take me to, since I'm a week ahead, it'll take me to like, mid-December. And then I'm really going to just focus on running and tone back the flex stuff just in that last month leading up to the marathon, so that, again, I'm not burning the candle on both ends. So I'm going to take this cycle super seriously, because it's kind of like my last cycle before, taking a step back there a little bit before the marathon. It's a super cool strength cycle. So hopefully if you're on the app, get super excited. If you're not on the app, now would be a good time to sign up, because we start on Monday, 11/11. But yeah, man, super excited for that.
Monday, 11/11, Veterans Day. I think we're going to do something with the men's club that morning.
Nice.
But yes, make sure to get in for that final strength block that Gabe was just talking about. I also want to bring up, dude, we got some great guests coming up on the show. Jordan Syed, Tony Blower, talk about, dude, this guy, he has old school videos and pictures. I can't wait to have him on the show, because like Tony Blower is like, he has a spear system, and talk about like self-defense and all kinds of stuff. That's going to be a really fun conversation. Colby Lopez, also known as Seth Rollins, the WWE superstar. We're having him on the show. Super excited to talk to him. He's a husband, he's a father, but dude, he's also like on the road traveling. They have like this basically bus that takes him around. And I don't know. He's just a super exciting guy to talk to. We have Annie Thorsdottir coming on the show. For those of you in the CrossFit space,
that's exciting.
She's a legend, legend in the sport of CrossFit. And she's also a mother and entrepreneur. She's a total badass. And we have a bunch of other guests coming on the show that we want to have more conversations on. If you're listening to this and you think that there's someone out there, like, dude, I think these guys would have a good conversation with them, do us a favor, either email it in to info@th.fit. You could DM us these people on Instagram, but just like, let us know who you think we could be talking to, because I want more conversations with more people about more things. Like, and I'm really committed to that. And I know Gabe is too. Like, we want to have different perspectives. I want to disagree with somebody on something. Like, I think that's good. And so send us these type of things in, so we could start at least, one of the things I've been reflecting on a lot is like, your circle becomes your circle because you're interested in those people. Well, it's hard to get outside your circle because you don't necessarily have an organic interest in that thing. But if someone then introduces you to that thing, now all of a sudden you can be like, okay, well, let me start pursuing that. So just like I am with the peptides or whatever, it's a new world. Share with us new worlds that you think we might be interested in through Instagram or through info@th.fit.
Just got an idea for the title of this episode should be Peptides and Politics.
Ooh, talk about clickbait. Peptides and Politics.
Oh man, that's
perfect. Perfect. Well, make sure to get on the Train Hard app. It is absolutely incredible. Finish out the year strong so you can have a kick-ass 2025. We appreciate you guys checking out this podcast. If you get value from this podcast or any other that we have done, leave us a rating, leave us a review. We know there's a bunch of people listening. We need more of these reviews to help the podcast grow so we can get the message out to more people. That's the goal. We need more people to train hard and level up. We'll see you again next week.